We've all faced discouragement in our lives, in some form of disappointment. But what's the key into not letting your emotions control you? Today, we discuss the key to giving it up to God and how He turned my sorrow into joy. All that coming up. Hello, Unchained family. This is Faith Unchained, teaching you to break the chains that bind you. Now, if you haven't already, and this is your first time seeing this channel, please, I urge you to subscribe and click on the notification bell so you can stay updated with our content. And if you're new and you just subscribed, I want to welcome each and every one of you to the Faith Unchained family. Thank you for subscribing. And I'm gonna ask a favor from each of you. If you know anybody that would love this kind of content, love the kind of videos that we're putting out, please invite them to our channel. I want to continue to see our growth. We're growing, and this is wonderful, but I want to continue to grow. So please, anyone and everyone is welcome. And if you haven't already, I want you to go and check out last week's video, How Can God Allow Evil? The link to that video will be down in the description below this one. So you can go and check that out so you can catch up. Now, I have a question that I want to ask you guys before we move forward, and let me know down in the comments section below. Do you struggle with controlling your emotions because of discouragement due to some form of disappointment? Let me know, and I'll do my best to get back to each and every one of you. See, the thing about discouragement is that it's universal, which means everybody at some point in their lives is going to experience some form of disappointment, which leads to discouragement. The other thing about discouragement is that it's reoccurring. So, meaning it can happen, you could be discouraged one week and not the other. You can't trust those emotions, because when we dwell on negative feelings, negative thoughts, it'll take us back to that moment where we were most disappointed, and thus resurfaces that discouragement. The other thing about discouragement is that it's contagious, meaning it could spread from one person to another like a wildfire. But we forget that discouragement is temporary if we allow it to be. The second we stop allowing it to be temporary is when we start to get caught up in those negative feelings and emotions. It's the moment when we cannot see our way out because we can't see past our own sorrow. It's the moment when we start placing blame on others rather than ourselves. And it's the moment where we end up taking our anger out on people that do not deserve it. So people can endure any trial as long as they can see an end that is good. But the moment that ceases to exist and they can't see that end, that's the moment where life starts to become overwhelmingly bleak. Now, all discouragement starts with some form of disappointment, which is a cause of some failed expectation, hope, or desire. Because of our sin and our fallenness, disappointment is inevitable, and it can come in the form of people or circumstances, which in turn leads to said discouragement. But what a lot of people fail to understand is that we make the choice to give in to discouragement. We make that choice. We give in to despair, hopelessness, fear and pain. We cause ourselves more pain than we should. And this is why people end up committing suicide. Because they can't see their way out of the problem. They don't know that they don't have to remain discouraged. They can't see past their own sorrow to see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I guess the best illustration that I can give you is, I'm sure anybody who's watching this video has at some point almost drowned in their life. I have. Somebody had to jump in and save me. But see, the thing about somebody who's drowning is, even though there's somebody that's coming out there to attempt to save them, they don't realize that they're being saved. Because they're so focused on, oh my gosh, I'm going to drown. I can't breathe, I'm suffocating. They can't see past their own suffering. They can't see past their own sorrow to be able to realize, hey, I'm being saved. So as a result, they're gonna end up not only hurting themselves, but also hurting the person that's trying to save them. So how do we handle discouragement? How do we avoid remaining discouraged when we're disappointed? Now, the first step is perspective. This is looking inside of yourself and asking yourself the question as to, why am I discouraged? What caused it? How long has it taken me to get to the point where I'm at right now? The key to overcoming discouragement is allowing yourself to have the proper mindset to overcome it. So this takes us to another example, which leads back to the second time I almost drowned. Yeah, apparently one time wasn't enough, so we had to go back for a second time. But I was a little kid, I didn't know any better. So we're at a little pool party. This time there's no lifeguard. I was with my friends, and they were swimming in the deep end. And I wanted to go swim with them because I didn't want to be the only little kid over in the shallow end. So I went and I jumped in the deep end, thinking to myself, I can swim this time. They're over here. I can swim. Well, that didn't work out so well, as you'd have figured. I'm sitting there flailing around, trying to fight against the water, panicking, anxious to get out. But I was surprised, looking back, that as a little kid, I realized something. That sitting there trying to fight against something that can potentially help you if you let it, giving into despair, hopelessness, fear, panic, anxiety, it's not going to get you anywhere. So what I did, and I was surprised that I did this as a little kid, I calmed down. I did what I call the 3 C's. I remained cool, calm, and collected. When you're calm, you're able to step back and see solutions to problems that you would not normally be able to see if you got caught up in despair, hopelessness, fear. You wouldn't be able to see that. But because I was calm, I allowed myself to sink down to the bottom. Instead of working against the water, I worked with the water. And I pushed myself back up from the floor. And I did that repeatedly until I got to the edge of the pool. So, what's the key to coming in with the proper mindset? remaining cool, calm, and collected. Step number 2, we keep our head held high. Why? Because we know that God has the power to get us out of any situation. And He wants us to know 2 things. The first is that He loves us. And the second is that He's always with us. He wants to not only direct us, He wants to help us, and He wants to guide us. But the only way He can do that is if we trust in Him and allow Him to do that. We approach it with the proper perspective by having a cool, calm, and collected mindset. And step number 3, remembering what God has done. So when we do this, we're able to look back and think to how many times God has got us out of certain situations in our lives. And when we're able to realize this, we're able to move forward. But see, the problem is that people get stuck looking in the rearview mirror of life. They always want to tell you about the past without having ever done anything to fix it. Because they're not able to follow the first step, which is having the proper perspective, which gives you the proper mindset of being cool, calm, and collected. Instead, they've given into despair, hopelessness, fear, and caused themselves more harm than good. And step 2, they can't keep their head high because they don't know that there's somebody with them the whole time trying to help them. And obviously, if your head's down and you're not able to look forward, you're not able to look and see what's ahead, you're not able to see that, yes, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Instead of telling me about your past, tell me about what God is doing in your life right now. Tell me about what you want God to do in your future. Here's a word of advice. You'll never be able to move forward if you're always looking back. We must understand and trust that God is there to help. And when we trust that, through Him we can find our way out of any situation. We need to trust in His will, in His purpose, and in His plan. And 2 things that you need to understand from that. The first, in His plan, is to mold and shape you into the person He wants you to be. And the second is to equip you so in turn you can go equip someone else. Now another Unchained moment! These are moments where I go over my experiences with whatever topic we might be going over that day. I go over and share my experiences so you not only hear them, but you take it and you apply it to your life in hopes that you don't get led astray and make the same mistakes that I made. Now guys, one of the things that I've had to learn is that lack of hope is the ultimate agony when it comes to suffering. But I'm very appreciative of that period of suffering that I've had, because I would not have understood this concept. The Lord seeks our joy. And He does so by always giving us something to hope for. Now, we look to John chapter 16 as to further illumination to the character of God and what it is that He wants for your life. Okay, so in this chapter, here we have Christ showing selfless love for His selfish disciples. And here He's about to be glorified. He's about to go to the Father. But the disciples, They can't see past their own selfish desires. They can't see past their own sorrows. And they can't see that Jesus is trying to tell them of the coming of the Holy Spirit. The disciples, they're confused and they don't understand what it is that Jesus is trying to say. And they don't want to ask questions because they don't want to know the answers. Because when we look throughout Jesus' ministry, we see that throughout the ministry, Jesus is telling them that he's going to die. And the closer and closer that the time came to him to be crucified, the disciples became more fearful of that. So they were afraid to ask. But Jesus knew that the disciples had questions. And he tells them that there's going to be a time where you weep and lament while the rest of the world rejoices at my crucifixion. He's grounding them in reality. One thing that we need to understand is that even in the midst of sorrow, the Lord seeks our joy. He seeks our joy. And he's going to always do that by giving us something to hope for. So through his divine compassion, he wants to ease our sorrow. And throughout this chapter, when we look at verses 13 and 14, he's telling us that he's about to go to the Father. And he's trying to prepare us for the coming of the Holy Spirit. And the purpose, of the Holy Spirit is to make Christ present and resident in the lives of every believer. And then he later mentions that women suffer greatly during birth. Pain is the sign of what's to come, which is that child, obviously. That's how they know that they're about to go into labor. But we go through pain to find experience in the joy of having that child. And when we experience that joy, we forget all about that pain. So guys, what 3 things can we take from this lesson? But not just this lesson, our own experiences. The first, this is all a matter of perspective. And your outcome is determined by your response. So with the wrong response, if you don't have the proper perspective, which gives you the proper mindset, which leads you to being able to keep your head high because you're able to remember and think back to everything that God has brought you through. When you focus on negative feelings and emotions, when you're stuck in despair, hopelessness, fear, and causing yourself more harm than good, you're not thinking clearly. You're not thinking logically. Therefore, you're not able to know that there's somebody there to help you, and you're not able to see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But with the proper response, the proper mindset, remaining cool, calm, and collected, you're able to keep your head high because you're able to look back and remember, hey, God's brought me through this before. It's all good. Number 2, you need to ask yourself these questions. What needs to be reorganized in your life? What am I doing that I shouldn't be doing? What am I not doing that I should be doing? What am I doing right, but in the wrong way? And number 3, we must resolve in our heart and in our mind that we trust in the living God. We trust that He's the God that He says He is. We trust that He is sovereign, meaning He's in control of all things. We trust He's a good God because we trust His word and we're reminded constantly of all the things that He's done in our lives and in the lives of others through His Word. We trust that we're not going through pain to come out empty-handed. We trust that He has a will, purpose, and plan in our lives to shape and mold us into the person He wants us to be, so that we can go and equip others because of it. We trust that He's with us in all circumstances, living in us through the Holy Spirit. Guys, that's it for today's video, but before we close, I want to ask you, after watching this video, do you struggle with discouragement? And as a result, let your emotions control you because of it. Leave any comments down in the comments below. And also, if you have any additional questions, comments, or suggestions about today's video or any future video, leave them below and I'll do my best to get back to each and every one of you. Now, here at Faith Unchained, we teach you how to get spiritually fit. But if you're looking to get physically fit, then look no further, because this is my new location here at the Nashville Dojo at 13260 Lebanon Road here in Mount Juliet. And I want to urge you to go check out my site, swagpt.com, to get started and make an appointment here with me today. Now, a quick reminder, if you haven't already, go check out last week's video, How Can God Allow Evil? Okay, so you can get caught up. And please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click on the notification bell so you get alerts to any future video like this one. Guys, I'm gonna drop this real quick. Boom. Okay, thanks for watching. This is Faith Unchained, teaching you to break the chains that bind you.